Welcome to the Rotary Club of Hudson. My name is Evan McCauley, president of the club, and we are thrilled to have you joining us today. This meeting broadcast is available on HCTV as well as our Rotary of Hudson YouTube channel. Our club meets weekly at Laurel Lake for breakfast on Wednesday mornings from 7:15 to 8:30 a.m. Come out and join us for a meeting. We'd love to have you as a guest. To learn more about Rotary, our club, and the impact that we are having on the local community and world, please visit rotaryhudson.org. Enjoy the meeting today and be the inspiration.
All right, Dad, you're on your own.
Good morning, Rotary guests.
Good morning. Good morning.
Welcome to the Rotary Club of Hudson. Constable and Sergeant at Arms. Our invocation this morning is by Kelly Brennan.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Bow our heads. It's short and quick. May your doctor never earn $1 from you. May your heart never give out. May the 10 toes of your feet steer you clear of misfortune. And before you're much older, may you hear much better blessings than this. Amen.
Amen. Well done.
Short and sweet.
And to lead us in the pledge and four-way test this morning, which is a test since he's had a year off from having to do this, Evan McCauley.
Evan.
All right,
It's all on there too. So.
start with the pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the pledge, or the four-way test. I'm still sleeping this morning. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth,
Will be beneficial to all concerned.
thank you.
Thank you, Evan. I think that shows that we shouldn't allow the president to go a whole year without having to lead us. This year, maybe we'll have to work with October once or twice. Lead us in song, Chris Barker.
Thank you. Well, Evan, I totally understand. You're used to being at the podium and talking this way, so that's what you went to do.
Yep.
You get a free pass.
Yep.
After a year doing that?
Mike happy.
Yes. All right, so this morning we're going to sing God Bless America. If everyone could please join me.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home.
Sorry, I started a little high, folks.
Introduce our guests.
We were just testing. I'm going to introduce our one guest today. If you could please stand so we can give him a warm Rotary welcome. I'm going to introduce our guest today. Sitting right across from me, Becker, we have Bill Libby joining us from the Cleveland Club. He's been a member, a Rotarian there for 40 years now. He's lived in Hudson most of those years. His kids went through the whole Hudson school system, and he wants to transfer to our wonderful club. So, Bill, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
He's a smart man.
Yeah.
And good looking.
Thank you, Chris. And our president, Tom Tobin.
Kids are above that.
Thanks, Ron.
All right. Good morning, Rotarians. Good morning. Everybody doing well? All right, a couple of things, couple of updates here. Marilyn Orr and I attended a cluster meeting last week. It was very good. It was my first cluster meeting. Got a chance to meet the presidents and president-elects of various other clubs around us here. Share some ideas, learned a little bit about what they're up to, maybe some ideas that we might even look at integrating into our club, because we, believe it or not, we don't have all the best ideas, we just have most of them. Let's see. There's one thing to report, that there's a cluster grant, so a grant that all of the clubs in our cluster come together on to do, and this year it was focused on a security system for the battered women's, Akron Battered Women's Shelter. I hope I have the name of that organization correctly. There was some sort of a glitch in the fact that the folks there have already started to that project, and the nature of the district cluster grant matching program is that we can't fund a project that's already kind of like underway. So they're reworking that. The attitude is that it's still a very good organization and we want to support it, and we'll come back with another idea, and I'd like to have somebody from the shelter come and speak to us later on this year. So let's see, Art on the Green. We have Art on the Green coming up this weekend. I'm happy to report to Patrick that some things have changed. I will be back in town. I will be ready to assume some time on his, do you still have smoking slots, Pat?
We do have some spots that are still open on the chart. I'll pass it around.
Okay, Pat's gonna pass around the clipboard, and please sign up for that. We'll, once again, it's a lot of fun. Those of you who haven't done it before, and it's a great way to get to know Rotarians. You know, we come here on Wednesday mornings, we oftentimes sit at our own tables and we don't get a chance to share ideas with and get to know the other members as well as we should, and this is a great opportunity to do that. So please sign up, and it's good for the club. Okay, I did want to mention, I threw something in the bulletin. I'm interested in reviving a dormant Bob's Bikes program. So just so everyone is familiar with this is a program that we undertook, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or something like that. One of our Rotarians at the time, Chuck Obendorf, his dad, out of his own house, basement, whatever, would take in bicycles that people no longer wanted. He would refurbish them, clean them, refurbish them, and then give them to needy kids in the community. Well, his dad got to the point where he just couldn't do this anymore. Chuck asked if our club would be interested in doing it. We undertook it, and for about 10 years we've been doing it, and I'm maybe off by a few years. We partnered with Wheels on Fire for a number of years, where they helped us with the mechanical aspects of.
Started with the technical group at the high school.
That's right, and I forgot about that. Even before that, we had the kids in the technical vocational program at high school were doing some of this work as well. It was a great thing. I think it's fallen a little bit off the path. We want to get it fired back up again. I'd like to actually get some Rotarians to get a little bike grease under their fingernails too, if we can possibly do that. So I'm interested in anybody who's interested in maybe not just collecting the bikes and getting them from point A to point B. If they're interested in learning a little bit about repairing bikes, or even changing tires or something, inner tubes, that's fine. Please let me know, and we'll get this program back up and going again. Let's see. We have. I'm gonna mention August, I believe. Rich, maybe you can confirm this for me. August is membership month. And membership is always a big priority of Rotary. Rotary struggles to maintain membership, grow membership nationwide. Our club's doing reasonably well. We have 58, I believe we have 58 members right now in this club. We want to grow it though, because the more
good people we have in the club, the more good we can do in the community. So I want to remind everybody that each of us is expected to play a role in membership. It's not just Rich and Richard and Mike Swain, who are our membership committee folks, and they're doing a fabulous job. But it's the responsibility of each and every one of us to get out there and recruit people for this club. Recruiting means identifying a good prospect and getting them to a meeting as a guest. We can mostly handle it from there, but if you all will take on that responsibility of identifying somebody that you think would be a good prospect for this club, and we're not necessarily, I want to remind you, we're not necessarily looking for 28-year-olds. It can be folks of all ages and stripes and everything like that. People who care about this community. Yeah. So we can even steal them from other clubs, like Bill over here. That works too. That's part of it. So please, everybody think about that. And by the way, in that regard, wear your pins. Wear your pins on days other than just Wednesdays, because what it does is it strikes up conversations with people who see you, and they ask you about Rotary. What is that? It's a great opportunity to invite them to a meeting. All right, so that's my pitch for that. I did want to ask one other thing too. I am now the keeper of all of the club's historical records and documents. I have boxes of these things up in my garage right now. And Ron has invited me to, he's asked me to invite him over so we could go through some of this and look at them and maybe figure out what we've got. But I was going to ask if anyone here has a high resolution digital scanner that they could lend me for a while. That might be something that we could get some of these most important documents scanned in and on Club Runner or our website or whatever, maintain things digitally. So if you do have access to, or if you have a high resolution scanner, please see me. And I think that's all I have for the moment. Does anybody else have any comments for the good of the club? Any other reports? Nothing else this morning? Well, then I might ask Joe Avella to introduce our speaker today.
Thank you, Tom. So August we have dedicated to the topic of summer fun. And one of the wonderful opportunities for summer fun is the Cuyahoga River. So today we're pleased to have with us Jane Goodman. And Jane is the Executive Director of the Cuyahoga River Restoration, where she has developed award-winning programs geared toward planning for watershed restoration and protection, elevating watershed literacy and stewardship, and implementing on-the-ground restoration projects involving habitat, riparian forest restoration, and depaving projects. I'm not sure what they all mean. After attending Northwestern University, Jane began a career in broadcasting in Chicago. She worked in radio, television, advertising, and in 1988 returned from New York to her hometown in Beechwood. Here she began her second life working on environmental issues as co-founder of the Cleveland's Earth Day Coalition and Friends of Euclid Creek, and civic engagement as public information officer for the League of Women Voters. After 7 years of environmental outreach and education director at Clean Land, Ohio Parks Works, she joined the Cuyahoga River Organization in 2006. The same year she was elected to City Council in the city of South Euclid. This is a very busy lady. So please extend a warm Rotary welcome to Jane Goodman.
Okay, I'm short. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Tom. And thank you for inviting me to share this morning with you. Boy, that person sounds interesting. Yeah, boy, I have stories. Yeah, so I am the person who stands where environment and government meet. And that makes it interesting for me to come around to neighboring communities and municipalities we've done a lot of work with Hudson over the years on the Brandywine watershed, because Hudson sits, there are a couple of communities that sit at the point where more than one watershed begins. So y'all know that a watershed is actually not the water, it's the land and where all the water that falls on. I know Mimi, you're gonna nod this whole time. So, where all the water that falls on it, all the snow that melts on it, drains to one place. So, Beechwood is one of those where I think there are 4 watersheds that drain off there. Hudson is similar, there are 3 watersheds. So Hudson, part of Hudson is in the Mudbrook watershed, part is in the Brandywine watershed, part is in the Tinkers Creek watershed. So you're responsible for a lot of things that happen in water, in the streams, but it all winds up in my river, in the Cuyahoga. Yeah, thank you so very much. So that's everything in your backyard. That's all of the mown grass that, I don't know, somehow doesn't get swept off the street or blown off the street and winds up in the storm drains. That's, you know, all the Wendy's bags and containers that get tossed out eventually are going to wind up somewhere. We really appreciate organizations like Rotary that are made up of conscious people who are aware of what they're doing in the world, in life, in how you treat your community, your infrastructure, and your neighbors, many of whom are fish, aquatic life. So for us, fish are the canary in the coal mine. So how we know whether or not we're doing well, we find out by how many fish, what kinds of fish, how many different kinds of fish there are, whether there's bugs for the fish to eat, and whether there's habitat for the fish and the bugs to live in, to thrive. Mainly, that's our science-y side. And then our environmental education and stewardship side is getting more people to think this way. So everyone in this room has friends and relatives somewhere. Your consciousness about the world around you and your responsibility for improving and supporting the world around you bleeds out around you. And so we appreciate when people share what they hear. So here goes. We used to be called Cuyahoga River Community Planning Organization. And it sounds bureaucratic because we were created by a bunch of bureaucrats. We were actually created as part of the Area of Concern program. The US and Canada have a Boundary Waters Treaty, have had it since the beginning of the 20th century. So for 120 years now, give or take, we've had a treaty with Canada that says we will share in caretaking and keeping the water quality of the Great Lakes high, up to standards. To do that, they identified waterways that were not helping. Cuyahoga River was one of them. We had targets to meet the federal definitions of a healthy Lake Erie and a healthy river that feeds into a healthy Lake Erie. We also take care of the 10 miles of Lake Erie shoreline on either side of the mouth of the river. So Edgewater to Wildwood along Lake Erie. So to do that beyond just meeting those targets, because we're overachievers, we have to go above and beyond, but more than that, it's to, in order to meet the goals, you have to fix the infrastructure. Well, for us, the infrastructure is the land, the riparian, meaning related to rivers, the land, the soil, the trees, as well as what's in the actual streams and rivers, and the 800 square miles of watershed. So this is the map of the Cuyahoga River. This doesn't have a little.
It actually, there is a, here,
Does it?
I'll show you.
You have to point at the computer.
No. But you want to.
Oh,
Do you have a pointy? Yeah.
Oh.
I love toys.
Here.
Oh, cool.
This will-
Thank you. Good job. Thank you so much. Okay, so. So this is Cuyahoga County. This is where the river begins. Flows down through Hiram, Manaway, Kent, Akron. Takes a sharp turn at Akron, and that's first 50 miles, second 50 miles, goes up to Lake Erie. You are here, just about. So, oh, stop playing with my toys. So to do that, we have, our organization approaches it in many ways, and I'll talk about the different programs we do. But we were created in 1988 as a nonprofit so that this remediation of impairments that the federal governments of the US and Canada agreed were the standard for how clean is clean. You know, there's always been this argument, what's actually healthy, what's actually clean. So they set a standard for us all to meet, and they identified 23 US waterways and 23 Canadian. In Ohio, that's the Maumee River in Toledo, the Black River in Lorraine, the Cuyahoga River that winds up in Cleveland, and the Ashtabula River. 4 of Ohio rivers were not meeting standards. So we have been working since then to meet those standards, and these are the standards these are the impairments that we had to remedy. So the area of concern is only half the river, because from Akron down here to Cleveland, this last 46.5 miles is really where the problems are. So the city of Akron gets its drinking water from the Cuyahoga River. So the river above Akron is kept clean because Akron basically bought the land on both sides of the river so that nothing untoward flows into it. Great. But then, what do they do once they use that water? So the discharge of the results of the consumption of water and other materials. So their sanitary waste always went into the river. Thank you very much. And because the piping infrastructure, the sewer infrastructure was built back in the day when there was less paved surfaces, so less runoff, less filling of the pipes, less combined overflow of sanitary and stormwater in the same pipe. So when after heavy rains, I'm sorry to do this while you're eating, I'm glad you're finished eating. So after a heavy rain, when the pipes get filled, sometimes the sanitary and the stormwater mix. And in order not to overwhelm the treatment plant, there are little valves along the way that pop open and let the water go into the nearest stream. Well, that's the problem. So bacteria becomes a problem. And we've gotten so that that's our biggest problem anymore, which is great. meaning there isn't, we don't have problems with industrial waste anymore, thanks to the Clean Water Act. Oh, you might have heard we had a fire 50 years ago? Yeah, that was us. So, which was not the biggest, not the worst fire, not the first fire, it was the 13th time the river caught on fire, and it was down in the industrial valley, industrial part of the river. But things around here in Brandywine Creek flowed into the river that were not supposed to be in the river. Brandywine Creek, Mudbrook, Tinkers Creek, which is the biggest, our biggest, oh, I hit the wrong button.
Okay.
Thank you. Tiny little thing, big fat fingers. So this is, let's see, you are here. You see that down here where Mudbrook, Brandywine, and Tinkers Creek? So you're at the headwaters of Tinkers Creek. So what you do here flows all the way down Tinkers Creek and all the way into Brandywine Creek. Do you remember the flood of 2006? Yes. Well, it was right after that we were called on to develop a balanced growth plan for the watershed, and it sits in your planning department and your engineering department here in Hudson, in fact, and it's used to see where the erodible soils are, where it's best, where it's the best place to develop and the worst place to develop based on the environmental characteristics. So when I go to Washington, which I do several times a year with my city council hat on, of course I'm always talking about water and watersheds as infrastructure. I sit on a National League of Cities Advocacy Committee for Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources. And of course, we're always talking about infrastructure. And I'm the one that's saying, getting agreement, but saying water is infrastructure not just as drinking water and not just as pipes and not just as sewer pipes, but water around the land. So floodplains is part of infrastructure. Soil. You can't build a bridge without figuring out what kind of soil you're going to build it on and how deep you have to go. You've got to pay attention to the natural infrastructure before you can think about building unnatural infrastructure. So we do that. These are our targets. We have completed 3. We have knocked 3 off our list, so we're 30% of the way done. The new ones are tougher, so we're building up fish populations. One of the handouts that's on the table there talks about the Tenbrook, Hudson Tenbrook project, which is a restoration, a stream restoration. If you can get the streams working correctly, that system, that infrastructure, will work throughout its whole part of the watershed. Benthos, who knows what benthos means, other than Mimi? Mimi was part of the instigation of our organization when we were the Remedial Action Plan, the RAP. We used to be called the RAP for Remedial Action Plan. When we were planning how to meet these targets. It wasn't that long ago. We were all just so young when it started. So fish populations, fish diversity. We have to figure out what to do with the sediment that gets dredged from the ship channel. If you've been to the ship channel and you've seen some of those enormous freighters that are bringing usually building materials, sand and gravel, slag, taconite from the Iron Range to ArcelorMittal steel. Those ships are 700 feet long and usually about 100 feet wide. The river is only about 150 feet wide. So if you've seen them make those turns, it's tricky, but it has to be dredged to get them up and down. We're working on stabilizing Irishtown Bend, so that James and the other rowers don't have the hillside fall on them, and so that it doesn't slide and block the way, because if that slides in and blocks the way of the lake carriers bringing materials to the steel plant shuts down. That's a lot of jobs and a lot of work. So it's the area of concern is 46.5 miles, 22 of which are national park. Well, national park, and the national park is actually partly Cleveland Metro Parks and partly Summit Metro Parks, because some of those properties are shared properties. So half of our job, you would imagine, is taken care of because it's taken to heart by the Department of the Interior. Well, unfortunately, they didn't really care about the river. They didn't do a whole lot until this year. So this being the 50th anniversary of that fire that we're celebrating, because without that fire, we might not have had the Clean Water Act, at least not as quickly. The EPA would not have its own agency to protect and enforce the Clean Water Act. So we celebrate that as the spark that started the clean water movement, and all things wonderful in the environmental world. It really did bring people's attention to it. Who knows what eutrophication means?
George.
Okay, Mimi.
It's basically water that has too much nutrient and it
Pretty much.
tends to grow.
Would you repeat
Lack
that?
oxygen and grow algae.
Lacks oxygen and grows algae. Exactly. Too many nutrients, yes,
Yeah.
because of too many nutrients. We also, so one of the, so we have to figure out what to do with the dredged material because it cannot be put in the lake. We don't want it in the lake area is the shallowest, we can't add to it. And there is one area where the dredge, in the ship channel, where the dredge does still contain a certain level of PCBs, and it is totally illegal, federally illegal, not just Ohioally illegal, to put any contaminants in Lake Erie. We had a little tiff with the Army Corps of Engineers a few years ago because they just wanted to dump everything in the lake, and we said no, that's not helping us meet our goals. So Governor Kasich and the Ohio Assembly actually made it illegal for any dredge from any of Ohio ports to be disposed of in the open lake. We can use it for beach enrichment close in, but they cannot, by law, schlep it out to the middle of Lake Erie and just dump it. Which now creates problems for all of our sister harbors. We're sometimes loved and sometimes not. Sometimes we make trouble. So there's more than 1 million people who live in the area of concern, well, in the whole watershed. Our watershed is about 800 square miles. About 500 square miles of that is the area of concern. We are hosting all of the Great Lakes areas of concern here in September. Oh my gosh, that's next month. So they'll be coming from Minnesota, from Lake Superior, all the Lake Erie areas that have been under this dicta. So one of our programs puts fish habitat in the river. If you're at the river now, if you've been to the river lately, you can't see any of these from the surface because the water is so high that they're all underwater, which is fine for the fish. That's great. The idea is that on the steel bulkheads, there's no shallow areas for fish. There's no protection from the prop wash, not only of the smaller boats, the Good Time and the Nautica, but from those 700-foot long freighters that maneuver by pushing water sideways up against the steel walls. So if you're a little fish and you're trying to float 6 miles, so that ship channel is 6 miles long, you're trying to float from the natural river where it was shallow and your parents laid eggs and you got your first fins, and now you're trying to get to Lake Erie to grow up, be big and strong so you can come back up. You're getting bashed around like crazy. So these are mostly sheltered. Yeah, you gotta be tough. I don't know if anybody of you remember back in the 70s, in the Dennis Kucinich days of Cleveland, there were t-shirts that said, Cleveland, you gotta be tough.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a fish living in Cleveland, you gotta be tough. It's much nicer in Hudson and all the little creeks that go to Brandywine because it's just nicer. It's cleaner out here, it's not as urban. I'm jealous. So anyway, so our fish have to make it through. So we have installed, there's a total of 500 of these separate little cage structures, box structures, and some of the gates just to enclose the crenellations in the, or corrugations in the steel walls, so that the little fish have somewhere to hide from the big fish that want to eat them. So they can grow up big and strong. So, James recognized this as a rower. We have done them on the front of the bulkhead, on the water side of the bulkhead. We have done a project behind the bulkheads, the Scranton Flats project, where the towpath goes. But we took down most of that bulkhead there because it wasn't needed. There was no ship coming up to load or unload. Fred Geis and his partners have bought the other side of the Scranton Peninsula. So if you know the ship channel part of the river at all, this is the foundry. This is where the foundry is. The rowing foundation would be up here by Merwin's and on the other side of the Columbus Road. Irishtown Bend starts about here, you can't see it, at the Columbus Road. Imagine, if you will, the riverbank goes here, goes along here, that's where Irishtown Bend is. So we are talking with Geis, who bought this property, and is planning to do the Thunderbird development, mixed use, residential, office, etc. To take this piece of property, it's one long strip of property, and do behind the bulkhead fish habitat here, so that there's a shallow place where fish could actually lay eggs and hang around, because the rest of the channel is 22 feet deep. Fish don't live at 22 feet deep. Our fish don't live 22 feet deep. They need shallow areas, so this is our next project. We have a tree program. In healthy streams require shade, and they require deciduous trees, broadleaf trees that drop their leaves, the leaves disintegrate, they turn into fish food, etc., etc. Well, somebody has to take care of the trees and plant new generations of trees so that there's always a succession. So we have planted, over the last 10 years, we have planted about, 10,000 trees. And, well, we've planted and given away 10,000 or more trees. The last tree planting project last year was in Mudbrook down in Stowe. We work closely with the Arbor Day Foundation, who funds us, and CSX, who has a million miles of trees. Anyway, the railroad has a riparian, so specifically trees along streams project. This is our most recently added cool program. So we beg people not to pave any more than you have to, because flooding comes from too much paving. Too much paving is the bane of our existence and the cause of most of your problems, most of all of our problems. So when there's too much pavement, there is no law that says once you pave a piece of land, it always has to stay paved forever and ever and ever, amen. So we have become the Northeast Ohio affiliate of the original D-Pave organization out of Portland, Oregon. Of course, everything green starts in Portland. So they came and trained us, and we trained project managers, and now we go out and get volunteers removing parts of parking lots. Like, you really don't need every single parking space more than that Black Friday shopping day. So it would be so much better if you removed some of that and put a tree there. You know, when you go to park in a parking lot over, sorry, I feel like I'm ignoring you. I'm not. You look for the shade. You're gonna wanna park in the shade. Well, I dare you. No, I challenge you. No, I ask you. Today, well, which doesn't happen to be the sunniest day, the next really sunny day, when you go to a place with a big parking lot, see if there's any shade, and then notice how long it takes you to cool your car down, how much extra gas you're using to run that, and how much energy you're using to cool that car down, especially if you drive a black car like I do. How much more wonderful you would feel and your car would feel, how much money your city could save by not having to crack seal and replace the UV degraded asphalt every year. There's cost avoidance, there's economic benefits, as well as the fact of cooling, air cooling, oxygen pumping, carbon capturing trees. Really, trees and cars can coexist and actually be a benefit. So we get people with parking lots, organizations and places with parking lots, we just sit down and design what part of their parking lot could become. Sometimes it's just a rain garden. Sometimes it's a bioswale if you want a sewer district stormwater utility fee credit. Sometimes it's just a narrow area where you can put some shade trees, but it's volunteers. So volunteers pry up asphalt. It's very interesting to find out what's underneath some of the asphalt around here. In Mayfield Heights, we found it was 8 inches deep. Well, the saw was only 8 inches deep. So we had the mayor of Mayfield Heights whacking that last inch of asphalt to pry it up. So volunteers, we come in, we saw cut. Volunteers pry it up with these big, long, scary pry bars, toss it into dumpsters. The asphalt gets recycled. Kurtz Brothers, we happen to send it to Kurtz Brothers for recycling. Backhoe comes in, digs out the gravel, and then the volunteers fill the spaces with new soil, usually involving the use of some of the sediment that's been dredged from the Cuyahoga River. So more often than not, we're actually bringing some of the sediment that went into the Cuyahoga River that got dredged, that's clean.
Not the PCB stuff.
No, we know exactly where we put. We store the clean stuff in one place. And, actually, this gets captured before it even hits the ship channel. And it becomes, Kurtz Brothers uses it as part of their soil mix. So volunteers fill the spaces with that soil and plant native trees and shrubs. So we are going to be having the first International Depaving Conference in Cleveland in next October of 2020, because we've been talking with our counterparts in Canada, the UK, Italy, France, and now I hear there's some in Korea. So we'll see who comes, but we know that the Canadians are going to come. We do invasive weed management. We're just in the middle of doing some workshops. There are some brochures here that talk about, we could really use your help. If you manage property, if you know anybody who manages property or school district properties. Right now we're working on how to manage invasive weeds without using nasty toxic chemicals. Good toxic, nasty toxic, I guess that's redundant. But also, these are a problem for the watersheds and the stream environments, especially Phragmites. We all know what that is. Because the sediment fills up and then you get floods when the streams don't carry as much water. I'm getting too sciencey. Anyway, we are part of the Crooked River Cooperative Weed Management Areas Coalition. We love long names. Which is mostly the park systems, all the Geauga, Portage, Summit, all the park systems. We put on River Day every year, and I hope that you have taken part in some. There's always something going on in each segment of the river. Sometimes it's tours, sometimes it's festivals. That's in May every year. We're considering moving it to June because the anniversary of the fire is June 22nd. This year we had a whole bunch of activities in June. The torch went from the beginning of the river all the way to the mouth of all the way to almost Lake Erie. You know the buzzard, the WMMS buzzard? Is anybody here old enough to remember that?
Sure.
Yep.
It's a joke. So the artist, David Hilton, created a rock and roll bass, because largemouth and smallmouth bass are among our most common fish now that it's a healthy, clean river. So there were a lot of celebrations. We are hosting all of the AOC, our counterparts. We had river rally, river people from all over the country here. It was just a jam-packed celebration of that fire 50 years ago. And now, so you can have this as a t-shirt or a mug. Go to Cafe Press /Cuyahoga shop. We did this for the 40th, and it was different because even just 10 years ago, we could not have put that last slide, that last portion in that indicates abundant populations of diverse fish. But this is the quiz, boys and girls. All right, so 1969 was the fire.
Yeah.
The fish did not fly above the fire, but for graphics purposes, what the heck? Who knows what this represents in 1972?
Clean water. Ralph Perks.
Thank you, Ralph Perks' hair caught on fire.
Oh.
All right.
Excellent. James.
The other famous, that's right, the other famous fire, if you ever become a mayor of a major American city, do not play with an acetylene torch by your hair.
Got that, Mayor?
1988, we still had some problems with odd fish. They didn't really have 3 eyes. That's a takeoff from The Simpsons. In 2009, the fish where we counted tons and tons of healthy fish, and in 2019, we are celebrating the recovery. And if you want more information, let me know. Thank you.
Folks, questions? James, do you have a microphone there?
I do.
Anybody have any questions?
I did take way too much.
Yeah, Bill.
Here we go, Bill.
Bill, here's
Wait
a
for the
microphone for you.
One moment.
So I have sort of a burr in my head with regards to chemicals going on lawns. I have never put chemicals on my lawn, and I do have all kinds of critters and things you would call weeds, okay? But my grass is green. I'm also a vegetable gardener, and I don't put any chemicals on there. I recycle compost through it. I try to encourage my neighbors, do not use chemicals on your lawn because it's going down the stream into the Cuyahoga.
Thank you.
That's,
Woo. Yeah, thank you.
Mayor?
Have you got any comment to that?
Keep doing that. Right, look, Dan, ooh.
Quick question, I'm going to
Dan,
probably
you
telegraph my view. Could you discuss, just real briefly, the excess use of road salt on watersheds?
Thank you. Woo, echo.
Yeah,
So yes, so Phragmites, that tall, bloomy grass that's filling up everywhere, loves salt water. So road salt going into even just ditches is creating a bigger problem with invasive plants that are creating problems for us. But the biggest problem with road salt is our aquatic life is freshwater aquatic life. The conductivity, the saltiness of the streams is now such that in August, normally by summer, any salt crust on the edges of a stream will have washed away. We are still seeing literally salt stuck to the rocks along the sides of streams, and the salinity of the water still too high for our fish as late as August, when you would think with all this water, things would have washed away. Now, we imagine that with climate change, cities will use less salt because there will be less snow. We're not going to be the snow belt any longer. We're going to be the rain belt. So you would think that with cities using less salt, less road salt, that would help us. That's like the only beneficial thing I can think of about climate change. But yeah, we're creating saltwater environments for freshwater fish, and that means all of the progress that we have made getting those fish populations back is at risk. Thank you for bringing that up. Please don't use salt on your driveways or your sidewalks unless you really, really have to.
Or brine.
Yeah.
Brine is worse than salt because of what's in it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I have a question, one last, I guess.
Okay, last question.
First of all, having road right next to those mud barges, there's a lot of material moving out of the river, but that wasn't my question. There's been some talk about reversing some of the rules about rivers, I think with coal companies and that sort of thing. Is there any particular legislation or thing we should be watching out for in terms of hopefully not reversing those laws that would then allow companies to dump their waste into the river again?
Whew. So, yes. Okay, am I done? Oh, you actually wanted to. There will forever be a debate about what waters of the U.S. means. And we contend that streams and ponds that in rains like this fill up and discharge into larger waterways should be considered waters of the United States and should have to meet the same regulations. That you can't just put anything you want into, say, your backyard pond if you know at some times it's gonna flow into the stream nearby and then to a bigger stream and a bigger stream. So ongoing wise, the definition of waters of the United States, which are under the enforcement of the Clean Water Act. We have to keep the Clean Water Act about clean water and not, I realize that I'm at the Rotary Club and you're all business persons or former business persons, so am I. So adhering to the principles of the Clean Water Act does not necessarily mean business should lose anything. We have to go beyond this should be about cost, this should be about health, people's health and the health of the environment. So there are a lot of specific little pieces, and I'll be happy to talk to you later about it. But in general, keep the Clean Water Act about clean water and not about whether it's too expensive to have clean water.
Very good.
We're obviously very passionate about it, and we really appreciate that because that makes it very interesting. And we appreciate your dedication. All right. By the way, I'm just going to throw out there because I've been thinking a lot about planting trees lately, and and with what you mentioned this morning, there were two quotes that I just wanted to throw out there. One of them I'm borrowing from Phil Herman, which he mentions all the time. The best time to plant a tree was?
Yesterday.
10 years ago.
20 years ago. The second best time is? Now. And the one that also goes with that, the true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. I think that's just really wonderful. So we have wrote a book. May I ask you, Jane, to pick a ticket? Dig around in there. Here, let me pick some around. Okay, anywhere you want. All right, good. All right, the number is, last four numbers, 1619. 1619. All right, Donna. Come on up here. You're getting $12 today and a chance at a $323 jackpot. First that. Oh, I'm sorry. This is it with the black. Notice there is a black marble. Go for it. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, darn.
Try again next week. And let's see. Anything else? Anything else for the good of the club? If not, I'll just leave you with the comment as we leave this meeting today. Let's all go out there and show the world that we are proud to be Rotarians.
Proud to be.
Thank you so much.